inside wall.
He's going to pass nearly 3 cars down that front straightaway, and he's going to get them all done with. What amazing.
Lee to the inside goes Logan Cloudman is going to touch in. Pit crash sideways. What a save.
Looks to the outside as Truncate goes off. De Jong into second place.
I'm going for the switchback. Oh, pinpoint driving.
It's howling down to the inside.
Trying this contact though.
Slide left to the racetrack. Chris Renner drives it back down underneath, and he takes that second spot right back. Joker goes to Garrett Lowe.
Garrett Lowe should take victory with all that contact.
He's going to try and make the move around the outside the parabolica. That's not going to work, but he's going to try and get the cutback here. Get the run out the parabolica. That's beautifully done there. Micah Schubert, there's a little bit of door banging as well.
And a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the picturesque Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit for round 4 of the 2020 Carbon Gaming GT3 Eseries. I'm your commentator, Lachlan Mansell. Tonight we've got a 90-minute endurance race coming your way. Joining me in commentary for this one will be Bo Albert. And Bo, we've had some fascinating GT3 endurance races. Sunday night is becoming a GT endurance night here on the SimSpeed TV network.
It absolutely is, and I'm absolutely loving it as well. GT racing, especially endurance racing, around a circuit like Phillip Island is only going to produce action, excitement, and all of the above, whatever else there is to say, because this is a great combination, and one that I wish we saw a whole heap more of when it came to the real world. But unfortunately, the real world's on standby, and all of the real world drivers are flocking to this series at the moment. We have some big names, as always, and boy, I am looking forward to it.
Yeah, thoroughly looking forward to this one. A few big names, but also a few absentees tonight, including our championship leader, Shane Van Gisbergen, and he will not be on the grid this evening. However, one driver who is on the grid, who will be very fast, and who is currently fastest in this qualifying session, Jackson Suzlin-Harlow, the Altus Esports driver, who's behind the wheel of an Audi R8 tonight. There he is on screen. And the Audi R8, that's going to be a car that's very, very well suited to this circuit with its high-speed flowing corners. It's going to suit the supreme corner speed that you can achieve in one of these Audis.
Absolutely, it's a very, very good car for this particular circuit, especially when you've got the few hairpins and turn 2 as well to really mix it up. The good balanced car is going to help out a whole heap more, but one car that really hasn't been all too dominant this season, one we haven't really seen right at the front of the field, is the Mercedes-Benz. And I think the Mercedes could be a little bit of a dark horse around their circuit. They've got power, they've got speed, and their front engine as well. So when it comes to these really long corners, they're able to keep the weight of the car on the nose and really hold it in quite nicely. So at the moment, we've got the number 7 car of Andre Heimgartner up on screen. He's currently in 3rd place and only 0.3 of a second off your pole sitter, and he's going around for another lap again. So those Mercedes, I would not count them out to challenge those Audis tonight.
No, I agree with you on that, and particularly in the hands of someone like Andre Heimgartner, we know that those cars are going to be very quick. Macaulay Jones, he's another driver who's behind the wheel of a Mercedes. Now, a bit of a story on him for you, Bo. So last week, you'll remember that Todd Hazelwood, his regular teammate of Brad Jones Racing in the Supercars Championship, was on a really, really good strategy at Monza. And it looks like he was going to be fighting it out for a podium finish. Then he came in for a pit stop at a point in the race where we didn't really expect that he was going to be due into the pits. I had a chat to Todd during the week just to try and get to the bottom of what that issue was. And can you believe that his seat mounting on the simulator that he has at home failed? And that was why he had to come into the pits at an unscheduled time to get that problem fixed.
That is unbelievable, and no wonder that he's ended up diving into the pits in that race to sort that out. That is a problem I have not really heard of in a long time. In fact, the last time I've heard of anything like that was actually myself a couple of years ago, and I can tell you, when you're racing and your seat is moving around, boy, is that uncomfortable to drive. So I'm not surprised in the slightest that he bailed on that race, and hopefully tonight, well, he's got all his seats locked in place.
So Jackson Suzlin Harlow currently fastest in the session, ahead of Jeff Connell, who's sort of been there or thereabouts in the rounds that we've had so far. Andre Heimgartner there in third position. Michael Hammond, very experienced sim racer, sitting in position 4. John Martin, who's got lots of experience in GT cars in real life, in position 5 at the moment. Then we go back to Lockie Hughes, one of our title contenders. Nathan Hearn in position number 7. Jaden Ransley in 8th, ahead of Jamie Craig. And then Hugh Barter, the young go-kart driver, who's part of the Evolution Racing team, rounding out our top 10 at this stage.
Yeah, and the times are very, very close. That top 10 that you've just reeled off there, all within 9/10 of a second. So very close racing with Hugh Barter on screen, running the BMW, which is another car which could go fairly well here at Phillip Island with its front end layout. But the only issue for the BMW is it's not the punchiest when it comes to straight line speed. Steve Ellery also adopted the BMW for this race, and they are very good cars, great on the brakes in particular. That straight line speed makes them just a little bit vulnerable, especially after a long front straight, such as heading into turn number 1. But a nice lap there from Hugh Barter. He would have been looking for a much bigger improvement, but jumps up to 9th. But the bigger improvement, I think, there goes to Lockie Hughes, who finds himself now in 3rd place.
So this is shades of what we saw at Monza last week, isn't it, where the times continue to improve as the session progressed, obviously, as the fuel loads burn down. Cars get faster and faster, and we saw, didn't we, at Monza, that pole position wasn't decided until we got into the very dying stages of the qualifying session. So it could be the case that we get a similar scenario tonight.
It's very possible, of course. For those that aren't too familiar with the iRacing platform, the track does actually have a dynamic system where the more cars putting laps down on the surface is actually going to build rubber into the circuit and make it a little bit grippier. Not substantially, not over the dramatic or anything, but it'll just give you maybe that extra 0.2 of a second that you didn't have at the start of the session. So the faster or longer this session goes on, the track will progress and get a little bit quicker. So the lap times may come in just a little bit easier. And the track conditions already benefiting some very fast lap times. 22 degrees Celsius track temperature here at Phillip Island. And if you are a spectator in the grandstand, I do feel sorry for you. 19 degrees ambient, so get your jumpers out. It's a bit of a cold one here tonight.
19 degrees isn't cold, Bo. You are talking to number 1, somebody who lived in Goulburn for 5 years, or almost 6 years, actually. So that's obviously cold. And our executive producer, Scott Fountain, is a Kiwi who is normally based in the UK. So 19 degrees is balmy by our standards.
Okay, I apologize. I rephrase. So what are we doing then? Are we getting the t-shirt and shorts out there?
Just about.
My word, what a commentary box I'm dealing with tonight. But we do have some very good lap times up on display at the moment, with plenty of drivers trying to improve at the moment. And at the moment, the times are actually slowing down a little bit. No one's really coming in with any massive improvements, which is a bit of a surprise to see. But Kobe Williams, we do have on screen that Mercedes, a little bit of damage to the front of his 94 car. So he's clearly run into someone somewhere around this circuit. We'll see what he can do as he rounds his way through the final 2 corners.
Few cars coming into the pits as well. Maybe just to bolt on some fresh tyres now that the fuel's burned off a bit, and to go for one final crack at it in the last 7 minutes of this session. And it wasn't so much of a talking point for us at Monza last week, though, because Monza, with its long straights and relative scarcity of corners, is not a circuit that's particularly hard on the tyres. But here at Phillip Island, where you've got long, flowing, high-speed corners that put a lot of load through the tyres, tyre degradation is definitely going to be a factor tonight in both qualifying and in race conditions.
Absolutely. These tyres are going to be going through all kinds of punishment tonight. There's a lot of long corners, and that's the worst thing for a tyre. It's not so much the quick change of directions. They obviously suffer a little bit, but it's these long corners like Southern Loop, where you just turn into the corner, and you're turning in mid-corner, you turn in some more corner exit, you're still turning the wheel. It's a horrible thing for your tyres, and particularly the front right here at Phillip Island is going to be through a lot of punishment. And that's going to change these driver strategies quite a lot. We saw last week, no tyres versus tyres was a big changer in terms of strategy. I don't think it's going to be as big a deal when it comes to tonight's race, simply because I think everybody is going to be jumping for new rubber.
Yeah, what we saw at Monza last week was that it actually turned out to be the right decision not to change tyres at the pit stop, and we saw that Shane Van Gisbergen on fresh tyres didn't have the pace that he needed in the last stint to be able to get to the lead of the motor race. But here at Phillip Island, I think you're right. I think pretty much everybody will take tyres. But again, it's a bit of an unknown, isn't it? We don't know how the pit strategy is going to play out. We've had, in the last couple of events, we've had safety cars falling at weird times. We've had 2 safety cars in each of our last 2 events. We've had one very early on in the race because there's been incidents at the start. And then the second one's fallen at a time where it's sort of made it a bit awkward in terms of pit strategy. So typically in endurance racing, Bo, whether it be in real life or the virtual world, safety cars tend to fall at a time that's not necessarily all that convenient in terms of working in with your strategy. So that'll be the other things to keep an eye on tonight. We do expect, based on the fuel tank limitations of these cars, that it will be 2 pit stops made by the majority of cars in the field tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. We are looking at 2 pit stops for tonight's race. But as for safety cars falling at unfortunate times, I absolutely love that. I think that is fantastic. Make these drivers earn their money, even in the pit lane as well, and get some very unique strategies. Because at the end of the day, we're all here for a brilliant flat-out race. But when it comes down to a bit of a strategy, and you've got one car on new tyres versus one car on old tyres, I think that is a fantastic dynamic that doesn't happen enough in some series, but it is happening quite a lot in the Carbon Gaming Esports Championship so far. And in the season finale, it's sure to be very interesting to see if that happens once more. But there are drivers who are beginning to punch out some faster times now. And you can see that earlier in the session, it was 9/10 of a second separating a bunch of cars. As it now covers just about your top 12 cars. There's 9/10 of a second. So the times are so close. And that is great to see. And also with some new names in there right at the front of the leaderboard as well. John Martin comes across the line to do another competitive lap. And we'll end up going 4th place on that lap now. So John Martin, who, like we said, has a range of experience in just about everything there is in the world of motorsports, improves massively as an enormous shunt cut in front. And who does that involve? Zach Nickel is involved. We've got Brady Carr, Hugh Barter, and a couple of others as well. He's qualifying, and that is why we can't have nice things lucky.
And Macaulay Jones lucky to miss that one as well. And that's a bit of a shame for Macaulay because he was on a pretty good lap at the time. Hopefully it hasn't compromised his run so far. Oh, just noticed as well, there was another car right in front of Macaulay Jones coming out of the last corner. We look back to the car of Randy Carr, who's running the Tony Bates Racing Bostic Alternative Freight Services livery. He sort of hovered there or thereabouts, either just inside or just outside the top 10 in our last couple of events, and as things stand at the moment, currently sitting in position 15. Once again, a pretty decent sized field of cars with a total of 41 cars entered for tonight's event. So, yeah, good to see that we are continuing to attract such big fields of machinery to all of these events on iRacing.
Absolutely. It's great to see. And obviously, we do have the announcement that a lot of real-world series are planning to return to full operations. That may hurt sim racing just a little bit. But you know what? I think in this whole period where we have had all these real-world drivers on the sim, there's going to be a lot of new fans of sim racing and what we do now. And plenty of these guys will be sticking around. And I think that's a great thing that we have been able to benefit sim racing from what is overall a bad situation. But of course, some of these real-world drivers may not see the light of the sim again, but hopefully many do. As I'm looking at Jeff Connell there, not able to improve on his 26.9, which is so close to Jackson Suzlin Harlow, but not quite enough. And he's not going to get many more cracks at beating that lap time. So we're down to the final minute 40. So for these drivers, most of them are only going to get one more crack at pole position.
Just coming back to the point that you made there, I think sim racing's here to stay. I think that once real life racing resumes, yeah, there might be a few people that gravitate more back towards the real world, but by the same token, people have invested a lot of money in sim racing equipment during this lockdown period. They're still going to want to make use of it, and not only that, but as you and I both know, a lot of sim racing events take place on weeknights when it doesn't clash with real life motorsport. So I still think that sim racing is going to be in a very, very healthy place, even once real life racing does go back to normal.
Oh, absolutely. I do agree on that point. It has gone from strength to strength in recent years, and this year its growth rate has exploded exponentially, and I think that's fantastic. And I can't wait to see what the next few years hold and just how big and great sim racing can be, and if one day it can attract the same kind of crowds that real world motorsports can, because it is quickly moving in that direction, and that would be brilliant for our sport in every single way.
So inside the final half minute of this qualifying session, Jackson Suzel and Harlow looking pretty good at the top of the timesheets. There he is in the Altus Esports Audi R8. We saw that Jackson Suzel and Harlow was very, very competitive in the Erebus Junior Esports Academy sessions that we had yesterday, although he got off to quite poor starts in both of the races in the 16 to 18-year-old age group, and particularly in the supercar race at Suzuka. That did cost him quite severely in terms of his chances with a podium finish in this race. But no doubt that Jackson Suzel and Harlow, one of the very promising up-and-coming young talents of the Aussie sim racing scene. We've seen his exploits in other sim racing categories, including the Tuesday night Just Ended series and the Australian Turbo Touring Car series on Wednesday nights as well. But right now, Jackson Suzel and Harlow is coming back on into the pits. His session is done. I think it's fairly safe to say that he's going to be on pole position for the 90-minute Enduro this evening.
Nah, absolutely. He has done a great job in qualifying and thoroughly deserves that pole position, unless anybody in the dying stages of qualifying is able to knock him out. Still a few drivers who are on laps. We'll see if anyone can cross the line and get this pole position away. Andre Heimgartner comes across the line. Is there any kind of improvement? It was so close to improving his own best time. Misses out by 100th of a second. We've got Dalton Ellery coming across the line. Fastest time of a 28.4. Improves ever so slightly and gains a couple of hundredths to boot as well. Jamie Craig across the line does not improve on 12th place. Again, only a 10th off his fastest lap. So a lot of drivers at the end of the session, close, but no cigar.
Oh, and a bit of a shunt coming across the finish line on the final lap there as well. As one of the drivers jumped on the brake positions, having just taken the checkered flag. But like you say, very, very tight margins, 0.7 of a second separating the top 10 cars in the session. Only just over 0.3 of a second separating the top 5. So the time's very, very tight indeed. But it is Jackson Suzel and Harlow in the Audi R8 who picks up pole position. And like I said, I think that this circuit's going to be a lot better suited to the Audis than the previous round at Monza. Here's how qualifying panned out. Jackson Suzel and Harlow ahead of Jeff Connell, back to Lockie Hughes, John Martin, Andre Heimgartner in 5th position, Michael Hammonds, Jaden Ransley, Macaulay Jones, Nathan Hearn, and then Hugh Barter completing the top 10.
Kicking things off in position number 11 will be Paul Auditore, and he'll be starting alongside Jamie Craig on the 6th row of the grid. Jamie Foster and Tyler Collins, 13th and 14th respectively. Brady Carr in 15th with a great effort there in the Audi R8 LMS. John Prudent gets the Ferrari 488 GT3 off the grid from 16th on the 8th row of the grid. Jared Hughes, Michael Gurry share the 9th row with Stephen Ellery and Kobe Williams, your top 20.
Then it's back to Jeremy Clark in position 21, Scott Short 22nd, Brady McHugh back to Justin Ford, Josh Thompson, Dalton Ellery, Brett Bishop, Fraser Ross, real life Australian GT champion in 28th position, Jack Caffode in 29th, and Lachlan Potter in position 30.
In 31st will be Ben Gomezol with Ethan Arp starting from 32nd. Zach Nickel in the Mercedes kicks things off from 33rd with William Yarwood in the BMW 34th. Ben Blaze in 35th, with BJ Kennedy in one of the very few McLarens kicks things off from 36th. That's going to be a handful of a car around this circuit. James Simpson from 37th on the grid with Mitch Campbell, Craig Gurry, your top 39 cars for the course. Sam Blacklock on screen there, our race control for the series.
So that completes qualifying for round number 4 of the Carbon Gaming GT3 Eseries here on the SimSpeed TV network. We'll be getting into racing mode very shortly. 90 minutes of GT action coming your way very shortly as we go to a break here on SimSpeed Television.
fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got everything outside of both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taking Anderson. Anderson's up top now.
Oh my god! Oh! Big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
It's very close. These guys I want to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, there we go. Oh no! That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?
The most realistic online racing sim ever made. This is iRacing. Detailed laser scan tracks, fully dynamic real world cars, and over 50 series to choose from. 6 online world championships offering over $100,000 in annual prizes. This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
Hi there, I'm Richard Jobling, Senior Software Engineer here at iRacing. I'd like to show you some of the work that we've been doing to improve the collision and the damage in our sim. One of the major changes we've made is how our collision systems work. The old system stored the track as parametric surfaces, and the cars were made of collections of spheres. As the cars moved around the track, we would recompute planes using the track surfaces, and then test those against the spheres. This worked well for spheres, but was too specialized to adapt to our shapes. So for the new system, we've built new high-resolution meshes for each track. This is more efficient and gives us a lot more flexibility for the car shapes. The new mesh incorporates all the track features our guys work so hard to replicate. Things like curb geometry and changes in the surface material are all baked into the mesh. We've also taken our laser scan data and applied that to the mesh. And since the mesh is so high resolution, we capture all the detail that's necessary so that the tracks are just like the real thing. With our new mesh, we can now represent cars using smooth, convex hulls, which grouped together form the chassis, the bodywork, and all the other parts of the car. The new shapes are a much closer fit to the shape of the real car. During impacts, the shapes can deform according to the damage, and eventually they can break off as separate objects. All the parts, like wings, hoods, and wheels, can also hang from their joints, flapping and vibrating until they eventually snap off. All these changes are going to add a whole new level of realism to our races. If you want to find out more, please visit iRacing.com and check out my blog post for lots more details.
Hi, my name is Greg Hill. I'm the Vice President of Art and Production here at iRacing. This damage project that we've been discussing is certainly a project that involved all hands on deck to pull off. We've got a rather sizable number of cars in our portfolio, and not all of these cars have been built with this dynamic damage system in mind. So what we had to do is one by one go through our race cars, and we had a team of 3 artists, a highly technical modeler, our technical art director, and our associate art director. All took on each car one at a time, and the work involved was researching that car, researching what would happen to that car if it were in a crash, depending on the forces involved in the crash, how severely it would be damaged, what parts might come off, what those pieces might look like when they're removed, what it would look like where the car has areas exposed that were previously covered by bodywork. So they had to do a lot of modeling to each race car, and they had to do a lot of work to essentially set up how the car would react to forces. So essentially setting the strength of the materials. What kind of force would it take to rip off this side pod, for example? Or under what circumstances would this nose cone get ripped off of a car? Or under which would it remain, but just be badly damaged. But all said, it's been a lot of work, but seeing the car models interact with the physics system and the new crash dynamics is really exciting and really cool to see, and definitely makes all that hard work worth it.
Hi, my name is Jose Diaz. I'm a visual effects artist at iRacing. I specialize in particle effects ranging from fireworks to water fountains, debris, crash, impacts, all in the service of improving the driving experience. So you have the main sort of new damage model that Richard's been working on. So that takes into consideration all the mounts and the chassis from the cars and which materials they are. And he's making all the calculations that tell you like, okay, it got hit from this one side and the strength of that impact is this certain amount of values. If you hit something, that means that this mount gets off, something breaks. This gets added on top of that to sort of complement what is happening there with things that you would see in real life when a car crashes. So typically in a car crash, you will see all these little particles of dust, metal, scratches that will take all that force and momentum and kind of explode in a way. And it's all being driven by how fast the car was coming, how hard the impact was against what. That will give you that sense of like, man, that person really crashed hard, or oh, it was just a small bump.
Hi, my name is Chris Lurch. I'm one of the vehicle dynamicists here at iRacing. Our role in the collision project is to tune the collision properties of each and every car to ensure that they behave in wrecks as a real car would. And we've spent quite a bit of time going through literature from the automotive industry on the subject to make sure that we have panels that deform the way they're supposed to, both temporarily and permanently, that pieces that don't deform but rather just break at appropriate times in appropriate ways. The cars are absorbing energy the way they should and aren't sort of bouncing off the walls in crazy ways. The major properties that we look at are stiffnesses, which is how much a piece of the car deforms when a load is applied to it. And then we look at a couple of limits. One is the force limit beyond which the piece deforms permanently. And then the second limit that we look at is the brake limit, the force limit beyond which the piece will simply break. And then we also will look at damping, which is how much the piece absorbs energy versus how much it takes like a spring and can absorb as potential energy and then rebound back out like a basketball would.
To the front bumper, and he hits him again now. Rayon Fowler into the outside wall.
Gonna pass nearly 3 cars down that front straightaway, and he's gonna get them all done with. What amazing!
Racely to the inside goes Logan Cloudman is gonna touch in. Pit press, sideways, what a save!
Look to the outside as Cronkite goes off. De Jong into second place.
Going for the switchback. Oh, pinpoint driving.
It's howling down to the inside.
Trying this contact though.
Slide left to the racetrack. Chris Benner drives it back down underneath, and he takes that second spot right back. Joker goes to Garrett Lowe.
Garrett Lowe should take victory with all that contact. He's going to try and make the move around the outside the parabolica. That's not going to work, but he's going to try and get the cutback here. Get the run out the parabolica. That's beautifully done there. Michael Schumacher, there's a little bit of door banging as well.
fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got tracks and he's going the outside of both of them. Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson. Anderson's up top.
Oh my God! Big crash. Oh my goodness, half the field's going to get rolled.
Second very close. These guys I want to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, there we go. Oh no, that's massive. This is it. This is over. I can't believe this. Oh my God.
God, what?
Hi everyone, I'm Locke, or just Lockie, you probably know me as.
Hey there, it's David Haynes from SimSpeed TV, also commentating iRacing with RaceSpot and with HJBC.
A good commentator is someone who can enhance the vision and the sounds that people can see and hear for themselves and translate it into a narrative that tells the story of what people can see and hear. Oh, here we go. Goes for the big send up the inside into turn 3. Can he get it stopped? They'll go side by side on the exit, but I reckon that Boyd might have just managed to make the move stick. And I've always said that the hallmark of a really good commentator is someone who can maintain the attention and the interest levels of the audience, even when there's not necessarily something happening that's particularly interesting or exciting.
When it comes to, moving my commentary forwards, always trying to improve, I think there's a couple things that help. One of them is just watching a lot of other motorsport, hearing how other commentators go about it and where the excitement and the passion comes from with their broadcasts. Also, sometimes listening back to my own commentary, even when I wasn't 100% happy with it, just to try and make sure I keep moving it forward each time.
Burst, one of those drivers who was quite quick in qualifying, has looked pretty quick, but had just a couple little problems that's dropped him back some spots. So maybe he'll try to size up on this one, close it in.
I do have a massive soft spot for real-life Hyundai Excel racing because the first car that I actually raced was a Hyundai Excel, which was in the 24 Hours of Lemons back in 2016, and had a lot of fun and got a really good result. Apart from that, I love watching and commentating real-life Excel racing because you always know that it's going to be really close, really exciting, and there's always going to be a mass collection of cars battling it out for the race win in any given event.
What's greatest about it is the affordability, that it's something people who thought maybe they were too far along in life to start racing can jump into. People who thought maybe they were never going to be able to afford to go racing can step in, get their toes wet and start at that level of motorsport. And motorsport's always too expensive, so anything that makes it more accessible, more affordable, is a great category that should be supported.
People to watch in the Circuit XL Eseries, well, Ethan Grigalt has definitely established himself as the driver to beat, and he's the one who has a target on his back, but it's encouraging to see that he's got some pretty high-quality opposition. Tommy Staunton had a really good run at Phillip Island. We've seen others like Lachlan Manif and Ben Bargwana continuing to improve as well, so I'm looking forward to seeing the results continue to evolve over the course of the series. I'll tell you what, there wasn't much space there. They make contact, and it's Greg Galt who gets fired off the racetrack. They were side by side, and Greg Galt, our championship leader, is in the wall.
Some of the people you're going to want to keep your eyes on is both the people with a lot of sim racing experience who are proving that, like Ethan Grigalt, Jackson Suzlin Harlow and that like, but also, like any kind of competition, seat time is going to pay off. So the people who are putting in a lot of practice in the TCR, maybe driving it across some other categories, are also really going to start to shine as we get further into this series. So people like Chelsea Angelo and some others who have been driving this car a lot, some different series, and making sure they get their practice in, they're really going to continue to improve, I think, through this championship. Thanks so much. I hope you all enjoy racing in iRacing for the time being. Hope you get back out on track soon. And also, hope you enjoy the broadcasts because it's been a ripper time putting them together.
I've just told Sam good to go.
Welcome back, everybody. Great to have your company here on the SimSpeed TV network as we get ourselves set for round number 4 of the Carbon Gaming GT3 Eseries at Phillip Island Grand Prix Circuit. Lockie Massell behind the microphone, along with Bo Albert. Qualifying has been run and won. Currently, our warm-up session is underway as we count down to the 90-minute endurance race at Phillip Island. And Bo, just having a bit of a chat off air about strategy, we think that just like Monza last week, most of the cars in the field are going to have to make 2 pit stops, but there is the possibility that there are some drivers who are looking at potentially a 1-stop strategy.
Yes, of course, we've got a slightly different system when it comes to this race, and unfortunately, I think it has been a little bit of an issue in regards to setting up the Ferraris, and sadly, it looks like they may be able to 1-stop the race, but we'll see if Race Direction does indeed decide to make a mandatory 2-stop just to make it fair, or if the race will run as it is meant to be. But otherwise, that is practice run and done. The next thing coming up is, of course, our race. 90 minutes on the clock. It's going to be a long one. And of course, we already ran partly through our grid, but there was actually 2 qualifying sessions happening at once. So our grid actually looks a little bit different to what we last saw. And it's just changed the top 10 a little bit, and that will be led away still by Jackson, Suzel, and Harlow, who lines up on the front row with Jeff Connell for company, Lockie Hughes and Matt Lopine in the top 4. So a great effort there from Matt, who jumps John Martin, who gets a top 5 on what I believe may be his debut in this series. Andre Heimgartner starts on the 3rd row of the grid with Michael Hammond, Jane Ransley, Macaulay Jones, and Paul Auditore, your top 10.
And outside the top 10, it's Jamie Craig ahead of Ross Rizzo, back to James Foster and Tyler Collins, Brady Carr, Jordan Pruden, Jared Hughes in 17th, Michael Gurry, Stephen Ellery, and Kobe Williams completing the top 20.
In 21st, we do have Jeremy Clark and Scott Short as well, as we're gonna stop doing the race countdown now because we do have a lot of things to talk about before this race, Lockie. And of course, fuel strategy was already one we spoke a little bit about, but of course, with the amount of cars we do have on circuit, 51 is our grand total for tonight, which is a fantastic grid, one of the highest we have seen all season long. Turn number 1, though, is going to be a little bit daunting on a rolling start with this many cars.
So running through the rest of the grid, it's Jeremy Clark in position 21 ahead of Scott Short, back to Brady McHugh in position 23, then it's Rain Campbell, Josh Thompson, Dalton Ellery, Brett Bishop, Fraser Ross, Jack Tafode, Lachlan Potter, your top 30.
Ben Gomezol in 31st with Ethan Arps in 32nd, Eli Donaldson in 33rd, Jaden Draper and Zach Nickel, your top 35 with William Yarwood, Ben Blaze, BJ Kennedy in the McLaren, Peter Matson, and James Simpson, your top 40.
Then it's back to Mitch Campbell in position 41, Craig Gurry in position 42, Matty Mascord, Eddie Beswick, and then it's Brock Feeney, Nathan Hearn back in 46th position, Hugh Barter in 47th, and then Justin Ford, Sam Blacklock, and Sam Batty completing the 50-car field. Massive field of cars here at Phillip Island. As they trundle around behind the safety car in this warm-up lap, everybody will be trying to get plenty of temperature into the tyres. Can we get through the opening phase of this race without a safety car coming out? That's the question that you have to ask, because the last 2 rounds, we've had shenanigans on the first lap of the race, which has seen an early safety car needing to be deployed.
Yeah, absolutely. You would love to think with Phillip Island being a little bit more open and being a little bit more runoff, that we may have a little bit more luck in staying green throughout the entire first lap. But with this many cars, it's always going to be a little bit tricky. And drivers always trying to benefit at the start of the race, obviously always trying to gain a little bit of something. And sometimes that comes back to bite you. We saw Shane Van Gisbergen last week. He started, I believe, 5th, tried to get up to 3rd, and got a slowdown and fell all the way down outside your top 10. It's so easy to gain. It is so easy to lose. It's risk versus reward on the opening laps here. I'm very interested to see how these drivers plan that.
I think Southern Loop and also Turn 4 Honda Hairpin are going to be the 2 danger zones on this opening lap. They're the spots that have been renowned for there being trouble in the early stages of races in the other online competitions that we've had. But isn't this a magnificent sight? 50 GT cars lined up in side-by-side formation as they exit turn number 12 in the final corner and underway, and it's Jackson Suzlin-Harlow who makes an excellent start. He will take the early lead. Not such a great start from Jeff Connell off the front row, and he's been shuffled back to third position with Lockie Hughes moving up into position 2.
Oh, no! Crashed right off the start. One of your leading Mercedes, Jeff Connell, has to cut all the way across the circuit. That's going to be a black flag and a massive penalty for him, unfortunately. But that was all down to another Mercedes in front of him that has to have been the likes of Lockie Hughes. And it's rotated the car at turn 1 and it's caused a big check-up. More cars going off the circuit as well. It's been a little bit messy. And we're only just getting into the braking zone of Honda. One of the Ferraris goes skirting off the circuit. It's Rain Campbell, who's had a bit of a nightmare there as well. And another Ferrari as well. Not playing nice at Stoner Curve at all. But for the most part, apart from a couple of drivers, including Macaulay Jones making errors and stuffing it in the tyre wall, it's been okay. There hasn't been any major pile-ups. And I think the race will be okay to stay green for now.
Jackson Suzlin-Harlow already with a massive lead over the rest of the field by virtue of those two front-running Mercedes colliding with each other down at turn number 1. Lockie Hughes and Jeff Connell, the route that Jeff Connell took across the grass there at turn number 1, rejoining on the exit of Southern Loop. That was shades of Cam McConville's big moment there back in 2009, where he went straight ahead and bounced across onto the other side of the racetrack. But look at the congestion a little bit further back in the pack. Moves happening up and down the field. Pretty much everywhere you look at a car off the road at turn number 12, the final corner. Tyler Collins, you do not have a small accident if you go off the racetrack at turn 12.
No, you don't. And Jaden Draper has had an even bigger accident at the final corner as well. A lot of these cars on low-pressure tyres, not liking these big loads we are putting through at these high-speed corners, and they're just suffering and rotating. These drivers not being all too careful. It's hot track temp as well, so these drivers have all of the odds stacked against them, and some of them are not playing the caution that they really need to be at this early point in the race. You need to be just blending into the race, take it easy, and build yourself up. Some of these drivers going for gold on the very first lap and paying the ultimate consequence.
Trio of Ferraris in behind Brady Carr. Oh, we've got another big accident at the Honda hairpin. I was just about to say Brady Carr being hotly pursued by Jordan Prude and Jeremy Clark, and also Brady McHugh in those Ferraris. Saw a fantastic drive, of course, for Jordan Pruden in the Ferrari at the Monza circuit last week. Hasn't quite had the pace in qualifying as what he demonstrated at Monza, but like we discussed at the top of the call, we think that the Ferraris are going to be pretty good on fuel.
Yeah, no, you expect those Ferraris to really come into their own in the second phase of this race. They just need to survive the opening phase because they will be running slightly heavier than some of the other cars around them with their increased fuel tank. There's another car that might be Kobe Williams off at the final corner as well. He keeps it going. Crash! The BMW has been hit again. He collects lock corner and up for the Melbourne Gantry. It's all of a sudden high jump for one of the Mercedes. That is an enormous crash.
Goodness gracious, mate. So as he's bounced back onto the circuit, Lachlan Potter, he has sideswiped Fraser Ross's car, and both of those Mercedes are going to be pretty much out of business. And we do have a safety car now coming out onto the circuit, no doubt as a result of some of the carnage that we've seen in these opening couple of laps. The other thing that's happened, and we've completely missed it with all of the other action that's been going on everywhere else around the racetrack, something has happened to Jackson Suzlin-Harlow because he's fallen back to 9th position. John Martin has taken the lead ahead of Andre Heimgartner. So, unsighted by us, Jackson Suzlin-Harlow, either he's made a mistake or he's had contact with another car. We'll have to try and find out exactly what's happened, but we'll go back looking for some replays just to try and tell the stories of some of the drama that we've seen unfolding in the opening few laps of this race.
And it was all by himself. You're about to see it on screen at Lukey Heights. It does cut out slightly on my replay, but we'll see if we can catch it here on your Motum Simulation replay. Again, it cuts out, but for what I can see, he's turned into Lukey Heights, and the rear of the Audi has just stepped out on him at the very last moment. You catch the end of it there, and that is a big moment for Jackson. There was no contact, no nothing. It wasn't on the grass either. That's the balance of the Audi just playing a little bit too aggressively, too oversteery. And all of a sudden, Jackson has had the car bite. And if he's having the car snap on him just 4 minutes into the race, whilst he does have plenty of lap speed in that car, it's a worrying sign for the rest of this race.
One of the things that we know about the Audis is that their handling characteristics are quite twitchy compared to some of the other cars in the field, like the Mercedes, for example. Once the rear end of the Audi steps sideways, as a driver, you don't get a lot of notice, you don't get a lot of feedback, and it's difficult to be able to react quickly enough to catch it. And in that case, Jackson Suzlin Harlow has been caught out by those twitchy handling characteristics.
Absolutely, that's not ideal there, but John Martin from 5th on the grid finds himself leading this race, and I find that an incredible story for John in the BMW, which I thought would be a weak car around here, but he is doing some incredible things with it and making some very good ground. Andre Heimgartner in 2nd and Michael Hammond in 3rd as well. That's a very mixed up top 3 that you probably wouldn't have called at the start of this race, but otherwise very, very cool indeed, and I'm looking forward to how these drivers go the safety car restart, because it wasn't lap 1 this time, it was lap 3 we got to, but a very big incident that involved Fraser Ross, and he is now out of the race, unfortunately.
Yeah, and he was the innocent victim, wasn't he, with that bouncing car of Lachlan Potter and the way that it just, the angle that it came back onto the racetrack on the main straight and slammed straight into the side of Fraser Ross's car. Nothing whatsoever that Fraser Ross could have been able to do about that one. Lachlan Potter was pretty much replicating the accident we saw for Rick Kelly in the Supercars E-Series, wasn't he?
Absolutely, but I think he did it a bit more successfully. He actually managed to do a perfect high jump over the Melbourne Gantry, which I've got to say, I've been on sim racing for quite a few years now. That is a first for me. So we'll go to a replay now with Stephen Ellery, who was, of course, the BMW, I believe, who found himself involved in that initial incident. And I've been hit on a number of drivers there, which was a nightmare to see. But definitely a very spectacular result, to say the least, as we take a look at exactly what happened to Stephen Ellery. And yeah, we'll talk us through this one, Lockie.
So just trying to work out exactly what's going on here. So this is coming out of the last corner, or coming out of MG, and then the final 2 corners, turns 11 and 12 on what would have been the opening lap of the Rudd Jones off at Siberia as well. But there's one car that's gone wide there coming out of turn 11. Now, Lachlan Potter was side by side with an Audi heading down the straight.
Maybe the wrong lap here.
Might actually be the next lap, I think you'll find, because it was the end of lap 2, I'm pretty sure, where we saw Lachlan Potter making that spectacular high jump.
Yeah, so we'll have a look at this entire lap. But from what I can see from my own perspective here is it was actually the driver of Stephen Ellery just running a little bit wide through that final corner, and he's actually ended up spearing back across the track and nudging into the side wall. He's then rolled back onto the circuit, and that's where he's collected a few more cars and sadly made an absolute mess of the front straight here at Phillip Island. But he's halfway through the lap now on the replay at Siberia. So in just about half a minute, get prepared for some pretty spectacular high jump. Also take a look at the actual balance of the BMW. In high speed, it's an understeering car typically, and sadly for Steven, that has caught him out big time at the final corner.
So all looking fairly tidy here. He was quite close to the cars in front. So coming out of turns 11 and 12, it could have been that he was affected by some of the aerodynamic turbulence of the cars that he was tucked up behind, the aero wash with these GT cars because of the amount of downforce that they produce. He just clips the curb there at turn 11, and there he goes out into the grass. Oh, yeah, so that unsettled the car, and it was as he came back on, the back of his car has collected Lachlan Potter, and then it was Potter who pirouetted in quite spectacular fashion down the main straight, and as we saw on our live coverage as he came back on, collecting the side of Fraser Ross.
So it was actually Fraser Ross who was up in the air and doing all kinds of flips, and he actually collected Jack Kofod, who was the other car involved there, but otherwise a massive accident there, and a very impressive incident that I'm not sure, well, I hope we don't see replicated at any other point in this race. But up on track now, a bit unique for this particular round of the series. Something we haven't had before is the use of a manual safety car, which just changes the strategy a little bit differently to what we're used to. So rather than being the iRacing safety car like we're used to, we've now actually got one of the brand new additions to iRacing, the Porsche Cayman GT4, in the hands of Kyle Gresch, who was the safety car, or acting as the safety car in this particular race. So you've got it there on screen. The GT4 car looks fantastic, but being debuted in the series as a safety car rather than a race car.
And so the advantage of that, just to explain to everybody watching on at home who might be wondering why you would use the manual safety car when you can just use the automatically generated iRacing safety car. By opting for a manual safety car, it just gives you, you can keep pit lane open. So when the iRacing automated safety car comes out, the pit lane closes, but if you control the pit lane, if you control the safety car manually, you can keep the pit lane open so as to not disadvantage people in terms of pit strategy.
Absolutely. So it just allows the strategy to change a little bit more. And for the season finale, I think that is a fantastic twist and turn in the challenge for the championship, which of course is still being fought out by plenty of drivers, even though our championship protagonist in Shane Van Gisbergen has not made an appearance tonight. McLaren just deemed it a little bit too sketchy to drive for even Shane Van Gisbergen. There's a couple of drivers there actually getting a wave around, which is interesting to see, and that includes Fraser Ross, who is done with his acrobatics for today's race, and will now rejoin at the end of the pack once he completes his lap to catch up. So Fraser gets to continue in this race and not be affected all too badly, apart from the fact he has now used his effect spare car. So all of these drivers in this series do in effect get a spare car. So if they get heavily damaged, they are able to jump out of their primary and jump into the backup. Fraser now has to be very, very careful as he's used, quote unquote, his extra life. And we'll see how he continues. And if he has to play it a little bit more cautious than some of the other drivers, he can afford to take a few more risks. So we'll see if any of these drivers are willing to jump on into the pit lane this time around. We are only 16 minutes into this, 13 minutes if I learn how to count numbers into this race. So I don't think we'll be seeing too many drivers dive into the pit. Steve Ellery also getting a lap back as well. But we did see at Monza last round that a couple of drivers towards the back of the pack who were perhaps not as high up the order as they would like dive into the pits early and buy themselves some track position when it comes time for that extra fuel stop. So of course, the more fuel you put in now, it's only going to be 13 minutes of fuel you've used. But the more fuel you can top up, the shorter your next two pit stops are going to be, and you'll gain time on the rest of the field that way. We saw it pan out beautifully for some drivers at Monza, but it looks like so far not many are taking it, but we do now have a few drivers electing to take into the pit lane. So one of those drivers includes the Audi of, who's that? Is that, Justin Ford. Sorry, was diving into the pits along with Ben Gomezol and Nathan Hearn as well. Now, Nathan, a very competitive driver. We've seen him up the front of the field in a lot of races so far this season. He's a little bit further down the pack and has a bit of damage to his Mercedes as well. I think that's a fantastic call from the TA2 driver. Jump into the pits now, gain some extra fuel, and have a shorter pit stop to the end of the race. And in fact, he's also taking tyres. So a big strategy call from Nathan here, which could pay dividends over the next hour and a bit.
Well, it's basically a free pit stop, isn't it? So, as we know, with these GT cars, you're not allowed to do tyres and refueling simultaneously. You have to do them in different stages of the pit stop. So, if you are going to take a fresh set of tyres, might as well take it while the field's trundling around under safety car rather than losing time putting on a fresh set of tyres during a green flag pit stop. Now, just wondering as well, is this the competition caution, or will we be seeing another safety car a bit later on?
We will be seeing another safety car later on. This incident, well, this particular safety car was caused by the enormous accident we did unfortunately see, including Fraser Ross and Stephen Ellery. But I've also just noticed that under safety car, Justin Ford has actually had a bit of a hardware malfunction and ended up driving off the circuit. So that's something to be a little bit worried about, that the JPM Ferrari, or the car that's sponsored by JFM on the side of the car, a few technical difficulties there, so he's got to be careful, and hopefully that doesn't affect him when the racing goes green. But just as he was entering turn number 1 under safety car, the car just veered heavy left, and definitely the telltale signs of a hardware failure. So Justin Ford, a bit more to worry about than the rest of the drivers on track today.
So, as you said, this is the final round of the Carbon Gaming GT3 E-Series. However, there will be an announcement made by Carbon Gaming International during the week about their plans for the next instalment of this series. So stay tuned to the various social media channels for that information during the week.
So, race control has given the official order that the safety car is going to dive into the pits, and it has already. So it's under the control of John Martin for this safety car restart, holding a very steady pace at 80 kilometers an hour, and has to pin the throttle at any given time, and the time is now. He plants it on the right pedal and will get this race restarted with just an hour 14 left to go. Plenty of time for these drivers to make moves and make things happen. But now all they have to do is just get through these opening few laps very cleanly. We saw people struggle on cold tyres earlier in the race, and there's more issues. Jackson Susan Harlow almost off the road at turn number 1. You have to be careful. The tyres aren't gripped up. I'm hearing a spin as well. So there are plenty of drivers. Dalton Ellery was the Ferrari darting off the track. You have to be careful when these tyres are not up. Another Ferrari off the track, as well as Brady McHugh. Many drivers just playing way too aggressive on the steering.
And he was battling with Jackson Suzel Harlow on the run up towards turn number 4, the Honda hairpin, but he's gone way off, almost back into the mighty off-track excursion for the Bostik Alternative Freight Services Audi. Like you say, drivers struggling on cold tyres in the early stages of this safety car restart, and Jackson Suzel Harlow, well, he'll get to move up a position as a result of Brady Carr going flying off the road in front of him.
Plenty of drivers just getting very aggressive, aren't they? They're just not really thinking about the state their tyres are in and getting themselves into all kinds of grief. And you can even see in the corner plenty of these drivers dancing around, and Jane Ransley will make Matt Lapino pay for that, as Matt now slides down one place. He now has the Vodafone Mercedes all over the gearbox of the V10 Audi R8. And Jamie Craig in the slipstream ducks out to the right, but sadly the pace or overlap isn't there, and will not be able to gain that position this time around. So Jamie Craig has to sit behind for another lap, as he's got Jackson Susan Harlow, who are on board now with, who's going to be very, very aggressive. He's going to try and make his way up the grid as much as he can. For those just tuning in, Jackson was actually a pole sitter and dropped it all by himself. So he's got a bit of revenge on his mind at the moment. And Honda Hairpin looks like a fantastic opportunity for him to slide up the inside of Jamie Craig, get the inside line.
That he can just slice his way through these as quickly as he possibly can. And it's been a bit of a pattern that we've seen in this series so far, where in each of the rounds that we've had, there's been cars that have had really good speed, but have made mistakes, have been forced or dropped back down the order, and then have had to spend time fighting their way back through the field, and it's given us some really, really exciting racing. Another car that I've been watching will be the 000 Ferrari of Jordan Pruden, which currently sits in 9th position. We saw, of course, that he took the race victory with the sensational performance in the last round at Monza, where he was able to hold out a hard-charging Shane Van Gisbergen in the final sprint to the finish line. And that was because he did a really good job of managing his tyres. Elected not to change tyres at the final pit stop. He was still able to circulate at a pace fast enough, and he was able to resist the pressure from Shane Van Gisbergen in that last stint to the checkered flag. But right now, Jordan Pruden holding out Kobe Williams in what is the contest for positions 9 and 10.
Yeah, and he's doing a great job at that. But last week, like you say, Jordan Pruden had to win the race by managing his tyres, and that's how he got the win. Tonight, he has to manage his fuel consumption. That Ferrari, like we mentioned earlier, has some very fuel economy compared to the other cars, as Kobe Williams decided to Honda can't do anything with it, as well as Hugh Barter dives up the inside as well of Ethan Arps. So Ethan Arps loses one spot, and the BMW gains one spot as well. But for the Ferrari up front, well, it's going to be very, very interesting to see just how much they can gain in the pit stop phase. And if Jordan Pruden, who's only 9th place at the moment, can maybe go 2 wins in 2 rounds.
Well, John Martin's taken full advantage of the clear track at his disposal at this safety car restart, and he's pulled a margin of about a second over Andre Heimgartner, who's coming under a bit of pressure from Michael Hammond in the contest for what will be positions 2 and 3 at this stage. So nice job so far from John Martin. We've got to the lead, encountering a bit of lapsed traffic.
Yeah, already we do have a couple of drivers for pace, but one of the drivers, Eddie Beswick, who's a regular of this series, has managed to let himself or let others through very easily. But John Martin, so lucky to avoid William Yarwood there, who's very slow at the moment. I'm actually not sure what's happened to William Yarwood here. He's got a fair bit of damage on his car. Maybe he's had a hit somewhere. I'm not entirely sure, but he's getting in the way of a lot of drivers right now and causing a little bit of chaos on the circuit.
And that car's crabbing. It's obviously got not a very nice exercise having to limp that car back to the pits. The reason that you try and limp back to the pits rather than just getting it towed back is that there is actually some time that you can save if you can make the effort to limp back to pit lane, but still a pretty long and painful process, especially when you've been involved in an incident that early in the lap. Having a look at the lap times, and I mentioned that John Martin had pulled a gap on Heimgartner, but Andre Heimgartner has responded by punching out the fastest lap of the race last time around, a minute 27.6, and he's got the margin to John Martin down to just 0.3 of a second.
Yeah, of course, that was helped slightly by John Martin having to take avoiding action, but Andre definitely punching in the lap times right now and doing a great job. So we'll see what he can do, as that time around it was actually 0.6 of a second gained by Andre, so big chunks of time being found. There is third place. Michael Hammond is into the wall at turn number 1, so a nightmare for Michael Hammonds. That is exactly what he didn't need. He will plunge down the leaderboard to 8th, a disaster for your provisional podium runner. So we do still now have plenty of drivers making moves. One of those is Jackson Susan Harlow, makes a move on Matt Lapino there, so he moves up now into another place, gaining up to fourth place now for the Logitech G Altus Esports driver. Pictures back on screen. We apologize for the brief technical issues there, guys. But Jackson Susan Harlow doing a great charge, but at the same time, Andre Heimgartner is now sticking with John Martin. So John, who had that very early lead from the safety car restart, getting to control the pace, has now not been able to break the slipstream on the second time around. So Andre, sticking to him like a bit of glue at the moment, he's just made his life a whole heap harder for the rest of this race.
I just saw a car going off the road. Yeah, one of the back markers there. Oh, that might be the lamping car of Will Yarwood, I think you'll find, who's still limping back to the pits at the moment. So he's doing a good job just to try and stay out of everybody's way. The next challenge for him will be to get across to the left-hand side of the track so that he can make it back into the pit entry. But oh, yeah, Will Yarwood not in a great position there on the outside to the left to get into the pits.
Off. Race leader John Martin has dropped it all by himself off the road. That was just a cliche error at Southern Loop, where you just drive in a... Sadly, he's washed out into the grass, and from there is no coming back. Lockie, talk us through the replay.
So under pressure from Andre Heimgartner, and like you say, he's just understeered off the racetrack all on his own. He was doing it so easily. Obviously, after the safety car restart, he'd done a good job to pull some margin on Andre Heimgartner on cold tyres, and he was maintaining the margin back to Heimgartner, but here it is. You can see that he was actually on the brakes in the mid-corner. That's a sign that he'd realised quite early on that he was just carrying too much speed, but wasn't able to rescue it from there, and as a result, he falls back to position number 5. Jackson Susan Harlow has got around Jaden Ransley as well, so Jackson Susan Harlow now up into second position, and with some clear track to hunt down the race leader, Andre Heimgartner.
Absolutely, so we'll carefully watch the lap times between those two. Last time around, it was Jackson Susan Harlow a little quicker than Andre Heimgartner, but now Andre with a bit of clean air. He has no reference point and no slipstream from a BMW in front of him this time around, so he's got a lot of work to do, especially when Jackson Susan Harlow is punching out a lap some 0.9 of a second faster. That's got to be worrying for Andre, who now also has some lap traffic, but the driver of Matty Ascord gets out of the way beautifully and plays absolutely no impact on the battle for the lead.
Jackson Susan Harlow's got raw speed at the moment, minute 27.2, like you said, 0.9 of a second quicker than what Andre Heimgartner was able to record that time around. So Jackson Susan Harlow might have made that mistake all on his own early in the race, but just by sheer speed, he's been able to get most of those positions back already.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, a few drivers having their own issues too. But he's definitely got the pace. He's definitely moving in the right direction. But again, you just have to be a little bit cautious when the car is, just a little bit unstable. And he's proven that early in the race. I'm sure that's in the back of his mind, as Matty Mascot, the lapped car, has sadly had a bit of an issue all on his own as well. So he was doing a great job of getting out of everyone's way. But sadly, he's got out of the way a little bit too much at Lukey Heights and dropped it off the road. And you can actually see the witness marks on the circuit there.
So Andre Heimgartner leading by 1.5 seconds over Jackson Suzlin Harlow. Jaden Rasley is third, then it's Matt Lupino in position 4, Jamie Craig 5th, Max Jared Hughes, John Martin in position 7 ahead of Kobe Williams, and then Hugh Barter and Jordan Pruden rounding out the top 10. To be honest, I thought that Jordan Pruden might be a little bit further up, but it could be that the Ferrari's just not quite as well suited to this Phillip Island circuit as it was to Monza. Jeremy Clark there just behind his teammate, because we saw both of those Ferraris on the podium at Monza. Or it could be, Bo, that they're in fuel conservation mode. They're driving to a number that they need to drive to be able to make it through the race on just a single pit stop.
Absolutely, and that is going to be a massive advantage if they can run an entire pit stop less than the other cars on circuits. They really do need to keep it at this strategy if that is in fact, because around the
So Bo Albert might just be struggling with a few little technical problems with his internet at the moment. That's okay. I'll carry on for now. You are watching round number 4, the final round of the Carbon Gaming GT3 Eseries here on the SimSpeed TV network. And at the moment, we're looking at Zach Nickel, who's currently in position 18 on the racetrack in his Mercedes. Let's having a look at some of the pit stops that have happened. We saw that Jeff Connell had that huge off-track excursion when he got tangled up with Lockie Hughes on the first corner. He's actually made 2 pit stops in this race already. His last pit stop was about 12 laps ago, and Jeff Connell currently scored in 17th position, so he's doing a good job of getting back a fair bit of the time that he lost with that incident early in the race, as we see Zach Nickel coming into the pits now as well. There's Jaden Rasley. He's currently in 3rd position. Last lap time around for him, 1:28.0, a little bit slower than both of our race leaders. And speaking of the race leaders, Jackson Suzlin Harlow continuing to punch out times that are a fair bit quicker than Andre Heimgartner, and the margin is now under a second. It's 0.98 between Heimgartner and Suzlin Harlow. We have completed 15 laps. We have completed 28.5 minutes of racing here at Phillip Island. But still a lot to play out. We've still got pit strategies. We think that most cars will have to stop twice. There might be some that'll try and get through on just one pit stop. We've got at least one more safety car to fall at some stage during this race as well. So a lot of strategic permutations and combinations, a lot of great battles, a lot of great storylines, all still to unfold. And we won't know exactly how it's all going to resolve itself until we get to the checkered flag in just over an hour's time. We ride on board with Scott Short in 16th position and pursuing fellow Mercedes driver Brett Bishop, who's just ahead.
Yes, indeed. And we do actually have a couple of drivers going off the road at turn number 1 as well. Lap down cars, though, so you won't worry about that too much. But unfortunately, it was actually William Yarwood going off at turn 1 again. So William Yarwood not having a fun time at Southern Loop at all. But in regards to a battle for the race lead, is getting right down to the line now. 7/10 of a second at the start-finish line. Already 4/10 of a second as we go on board with the Audi R8 of Jackson Suzlin Harlow. He's got Andre Heimgartner right in front of him and is absolutely hunting at the moment around Phillip Island. We'll see what he can do through the pass section. Going for a little bit of a move there, but sadly too far back. But overall, just showing that Audi has lots more corner speed than the Mercedes can hold at the moment. The Audi, like we mentioned, like Lockie mentioned, they want to carry the mid-corner speed. It's a big advantage of this car. But if you do get in the dirty air, like he is right now, it can get a little bit twitchy and get a little bit scary to drive as well. So Jackson has to contend between risking his car and spinning off the track once again, or going for a bit more of a safer pass in the slipstream down the front straight, though. Thinks about its turn one. Again, that Mercedes has some very good straight line speed. You're not going to pass it on pure grunt.
How hard is Andre Heimgartner defend this position, though? Because if you're Andre Heimgartner, you might actually be better off just letting Jackson, Suzel, and Harlow go and not getting yourself too out of rhythm by having to defend for too many laps. We've still got 59 minutes to go in this race. What you don't want to do is fight to the death and get punted off the road for your troubles. And there comes Suzel and Harlow up the inside into turn 4 of the Honda Hair One.
Andre gave him a little bit of a parting gift on the exit of Honda there as well. A little bit of a nudge between the two. As Andre perhaps just trying to give him a bit more corner exit speed maybe from the Mercedes. I'm not quite sure, but we will see if Andre does stick now. Jackson, Suzel, Harlow in the slipstream, and of course, Phillip Island, you do gain quite a bit in the slipstream, so it is possible to tag along with a car that is perhaps running slightly faster than the times you are doing yourself. So Andre in a good position, and like you say, could run a little bit more fuel efficient now, can obviously manage that a lot better as well, so we'll see what he can do.
Looking at John Martin a bit further back, our race leader earlier on, but had a mistake at Southern Loop and has fallen back into position number 7. John Martin's lap times at the moment pretty much comparable to all of the other cars that he's around. Jackson, Suzel, and Harlow continues to punch out lap times in the low 1 minute 27 bracket. Just notice that we've got a car parked facing the wrong way on the main straight, and Matt Lupino comes into the pit, so he's our first of our real front runners to come in for what will be that car's first scheduled pit stop, and it's Eli Donaldson who stops there in a very awkward position on pit straight.
I've actually just had a look at what he's done. He's just clipped the curb slightly at the final corner and rotated that all by himself, but he's still there. He's got plenty of clear track right now to spin the car around, and it's only just beginning to move, so he's taking his time to spin the car around. Caution, of course, is much preferred than rejoining in the middle of the circuit like we saw affect Stephen Johnson last week at Monza, but took a bit of time there to spin the car around, but nonetheless is back on his way. If you look at Jeremy Clark and one of the Ferraris, who are definitely one of the more fuel-efficient cars around this circuit. We're seeing drivers, like you said, already pitting now, and we are 30 minutes into the race, or past 30 minutes. It is a great time to take one of your first of 2 stops in this race and split the race evenly up into thirds, as Jordan Pruden there, who we're just looking at briefly, almost half spun the car at Lukey Heights. So those Ferraris, very good on fuel, but a little bit scary to drive as well.
More pit stops coming up here. Jamie Craig comes into the pits and Jared Hughes follows him in, so they pit out of positions 4 and 5 respectively. A couple of other cars departing pit lane at this stage as well. So how far into the race do you have to get to be able to complete the race on only 1 stop? The obvious answer is 45 minutes, but I actually reckon, though, that you probably need to go a bit further than that, because we did have that safety car intervention earlier on. I think probably a lot of it depends on when the second of our safety cars falls as well, but you would have to get to at least the 45-minute mark before you could think about being able to get through the race with just the single pit stop.
No, you're absolutely spot on. We're working lap 20 at the moment, but we're still expecting another almost 39 laps to go. So these drivers, like you say, do want to go a lot longer than past the 45-minute mark in this race. So if anyone does decide to pit in the next 10 minutes, they are being a little bit risky when it comes to fuel strategy to make it to the end of this race, because the final safety car could come. I don't know what the rules are in regards to this series, but if it comes in the final 5 minutes of the race, it's not really going to help you in any way with your fuel consumption. So for these Ferraris right now, you do want to get to at least the 40-minute, maybe even 35-minute mark in this race and go from there. But at the moment, they're doing a good job. Jeremy Clark just in the slipstream of Jordan Pruden, and they're on their own strategy, which I do quite like, as does Jackson, Suzel, and Harlow, according to my live timing screen as well. So a lot more drivers are coming in just 35 minutes into this race.
One of the key things to watch here as well will be, do drivers take fuel and tyres or fuel only at this point? It does obviously extend the length of your stop if you choose to change to a fresh set of tyres, but knowing how high the tyre degradation is here at Phillip Island, you probably want that fresh set of tyres, otherwise you're going to be vulnerable once you do return to the racetrack.
And Jackson Susan Harlow is doing exactly what I would at least recommend to these drivers to do, which is take tyres in this first pit stop. So Jackson up on the Jackson, changing all 4 tyres. And the reason I say that is because then you get to use these new tyres for longer in the race. If you take new tyres in your final pit stop of the race, you're only going to be able to use those new tyres for half an hour compared to an hour. So a bit more of an advantage to take that stop right at the end, as interestingly, Jeremy Clark, who's also in one of the Simfinity Ferraris, along with Jordan Pruden, has actually dived into the pits. So a bit of a different strategy there compared to what we're seeing from what some of the other Ferraris might be trying in this race. In fact, now Jordan Pruden dives into the pits as well, so we thought there was a bit of a chance the Ferraris may be willing to go for a one-stop strategy with their consumption and their fuel tank size, but it looks like all the front-running Ferraris at the front of the pack are not willing to do it. So if any of the mid-pack Ferraris or even the back marker Ferraris can make one less pit stop work, that would be a massive advantage for them and will definitely vault them up the leaderboard. But in terms of challenging for the race win, I think it will be a 2-stop strategy who eventually wins this race.
So just a few updates for you on strategy, Bo. You're keeping an eye on the racing. That was a massively long pit stop for Jackson Susan Harlow. 90 seconds he spent. 6 seconds he spent in total in pit lane. So he's fallen all the way down to position 26 following that pit stop.
Maybe a few different live timings. On my screen, it's actually showing 80 seconds in the pit lane and 57.7 for his total pit stop. But of course, taking tyres and all 4 tyres of that as well will obviously slow you down considerably. So like you say, he has lost a lot of time compared to a few of the other drivers around him. And of course, you were thinking that the likes of
Jamie Craig and Matt Lupino, both those cars did not take tyres because they were only stationary for 20.
I'm seeing for these guys not taking tyres, unless they're not taking tyres at all in this race, is you're actually using your new tyres for less distance in the race. It's actually Jamie Craig, one of your front-running drivers, is actually just off the track there at Loopy Heights. So like you say, not taking tyres, and sadly almost immediately paying a few issues for Jamie Craig in this race. But if you take tyres at the second stop, you only use those fresh tyres for half an hour compared to pitting early and taking your tyres in the first stop and being able to use those new tyres for an entire hour towards the end of the race. So it's just wins and losses, and I think at the moment Matt Lupino and Jamie Craig not taking tyres in their first stop gives them track position now, but for Jackson Susan Harlow, he'll get track position a lot later in the race where perhaps it counts a little bit more.
This has been a good long first stint from Andre Heimgartner. 23 laps he's managed to get out of the car. Kobe Williams now comes into the pit, so that leaves Heimgartner with only one more pit stop. Well, we'll have to wait and find out.
They fight for position, just trying to get them up on screen at the moment for you guys. A couple of issues with Phillip Island as well, and of course being such a high-speed circuit, one little misjudgment in turning the car into a corner or on corner exit can very quickly find yourself a long way off the road as well. So drivers have to be making issues. But yeah, no, I'm very interested about these Mercedes running up the front of the order. We look on board with Michael Hammond, but for Andre Heimgartner, Jane Rainsley and Kobe Williams, these spin right in front of him. That's the driver of Hugh Barter and Ethan Arps. We saw those two fighting earlier in the race front. If they could just stretch a little bit longer, and if that's what they can do with one safety car, we are expecting one more safety car in this race. They are in a very, very strong position indeed.
They are. Prop stop. There's Jackson Susan Harlow. You would have to judge him to be the fastest driver in the field based on his qualifying performance and the fact that he holds the fastest lap of the race. He's come into the pits, he's put fresh tyres on, but he has lost a lot of track position in the process. He's still outside the top 20 at this stage.
And that's a lot of... Ooh,
couple of cars off at Southern Loop there.
A lot of drivers are struggling with that corner, aren't they? They're just not able to get the car into that initial change of direction into the long left-hander. We're looking on board, and it's almost the same thing as we saw earlier in the race. That Mercedes, in fact, another car was already off the track by the time this up as well. So a little bit too wide. And the second on the iRacing, you get two wheels on that grass, you are in for a very bumpy and a very dirty ride off the circuit. So you have to be super careful, and it's another corner where it's risk versus reward, where you can go a lot faster if you really want to. There's actually a Ferrari spinning right in front of Jackson Susan Harlow, almost ends his race, but manages to avoid it this time around. But drivers just having a lot of issues here today at Phillip Island, which is a surprise to me, because this is one of the circuits I would say all these drivers in Australia have the most mileage on.
So Jaden Ransley has pitted out of second position, and the news for him is that he is taking fuel and tyres.
Right, there we go. In fact, Jaden Ransley, very, very slow in pit lane for a second there. He's struggled to get the car fired up. And actually, I think on what is the speed limit here at Phillip Island? I don't believe it is 70 kilometers an hour. I've got a feeling Jaden Ransley there forgot to turn his pit limiter on and has sped on the exit of the pit lane. So we'll just keep an eye on if the 53 car comes back into the pit lane in the next few laps. But I've got a feeling we've just caught Jaden Ransley with a speeding penalty. But right now we're looking at Jackson Susan Harlow, who was making his way around the circuit, still trying to gain time on the drivers in front. Stephen Ellery is his next target, as we believe getting a look at the driver being in pit lane of Jane Ransley. Now we're on board here. Now on the dash of the car, you don't see any pit limiter active sign on the Mercedes. That will come down the bottom of your screen. Revs the car up, ready to leave his pit lane. Off the jacks he will go. Now he goes slow from his haste to get back up on speed after that. He then speeds up to about 75 kilometers an hour there and on the brake. So Jane Ransley, I think you might be in a bit of trouble with the officials there, buddy.
Yep, there's no hiding from the software stewards, that's for sure. So, not like real life motorsport where you've got officials pointing radar guns at cars. If the software says that you've sped in pit lane, there's no arguing against it. Then you're going to be taking a tour back down pit lane for a drive-through penalty. As we're right on board with Jackson Susan Harlow, swinging down the inside of Stephen Ellery at turn number 1. That's a move to position 18. As Jackson Susan Harlow continues to punch out very, very fast lap times on that fresh set of tyres on the Audi R8. We've got a Ferrari off at Southern Loop, or just sort of between turn 1 and the entries to Southern Loop as well.
I have to say I'm very surprised by the attrition rate in this race, as Eli Donaldson was that Ferrari going off the circuit again, but we're halfway into this race now, officially past that mark, which is good news for our leading Mercedes in Andre Heimgartner and Jeff Connell. But we've already got 24 cars lapped down, which is fairly incredible. And the first of your cars lapped down was early race leader John Martin. So the attrition rate is outstandingly high for a circuit like Phillip Island in this race. So GT3 cars at the island claiming a lot more casualties than I would have expected. But like back to the original point I was making, Andre Heimgartner and Jeff Connell halfway in the race now, and they're still out on track. Great news for them moving forward.
Indeed it is, and also Nathan Hearn, who's up to third position, because they came in and kept topping the car up with fuel under that early safety car. He's actually only 21 and a half laps into a stint. Andre Heimgartner's now almost 28 laps into a stint. I reckon based on those numbers, Nathan Hearn's going to pretty comfortably be able to make it home with only one more pit stop from here. And the reason, just coming back to that point you were making, Bo, about a lot of the cars being a lap down, the reason for that is because a lot of cars have stopped. Our race leader, Andre Heimgartner, has not stopped yet. So he's obviously lapped cars that have already come in for their pit stops. There will be more cars back on the lead lap once Andre Heimgartner does finally come in for his first pit stop.
That's a great point, but of course, it's a little bit risky for those drivers that are a lap down, including the likes of Hugh Barter, Justin Ford, Paul Auditore, who's actually off the road at the final corner, and we'll have to very gently nudge it back on the track. Andre Heimgartner actually in the pit lane, just to cut across myself there as well. So race leader dives in, but the likes of Jeff Connell and Nathan Hearn continue out on the circuit. But for some of these drivers that are a lap down, of course, if a safety car were to come out, that's almost race over for them, such as the damage and effect that being a lap down can have in one of these long distance races.
Indeed, that's the problem with going a lap down, is that if you do get trapped because the safety car comes out in front of the race leader, He's lost a fair bit of track position. He's down in 17th position, but he will also be right to get to the end of the race from that point, and he will have fresher tyres than quite a few of the cars ahead of him. So Nathan Hearn, even though he's back in the pack at the moment a little bit, could still
Safety car.
Strategic position as out comes the safety car.
Well, I was about to say Brock Feeney is in a world of pain because he was getting past left, right, and center on those old tyres, and now it's going to get a whole heap worse because the advantage he gains by not taking tyres is now gone. So he has now got track position, but no gain in terms of time. So the gaps between the cars is a whole lot less. So sadly for Brock Feeney, that has not paid off in the slightest. And in regards to all that brilliant hard work you just did, Lockie, in regards to fuel numbers, they've gone out the window as well. Safety car is out, and it is all game on, reset again.
Always the way. As soon as I start to try and do any sort of sophisticated strategic calculation, something always happens on the racetrack just to stuff me up. So, once again, that's proven to be the case. So what would be interesting here is to see who pits under this safety car, because you would have to say that we're now in the window, Bo, where if you pit at this point, you probably get home from here.
Oh, absolutely. If you pit now, you are absolutely golden, I would say, to the end of the race. We're expecting the drivers to be able to do 30 minutes on a tank of fuel. You pit now, you'll still have about 2 to 3 laps under safety car, which means you only have to run about 24 minutes in green flag conditions. So if you pit now, I'm absolutely confident you'll make it to the end of this race. Interestingly, Brock Feeney has committed to the cause and has decided to stay out on his old tyres. I don't know if that was a great call because I know he's going to lose so much and he's already fueled to the end. I know that much, but he was getting beaten up so heavily by the cars around him with the pace difference on those old tyres he had. I think, sadly for Brock Feeney, he's only going to go backwards from here, and backwards fast too.
Yep, like you say, the field compression with this safety car means that once the race starts, he's going to be absolutely monstered by cars that have changed onto a fresh set of tyres. So the strategy really hasn't worked out here for Brock Feeney, and you just get the feeling that at this race start, Bo, we're going to have a mixture of different cars on different strategies with tyres in varying levels of condition. The one constant will be that you would think everybody will now be able to get to the end of the race without having to make any more pit stops. So we will have a cleansed field in that respect, but there's going to be some fast cars like Jackson, Suzel and Harlow, for example, who have ended up maybe not quite on the optimum strategy, but who are going to have very, very good speed once the race resumes. So it's shaping up for a flat-out sprint to the finish line with potentially some faster cars coming through from a bit further down the order.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see as well, who are these drivers who do need to make one more final pit stop? Which of them decide to take tyres and which of them do not? Because, of course, you are going to gain a lot more in not taking tyres in regards to track position under safety car conditions. Because, of course, when 30 cars dive into the pits, you have the chance, if all 29 decide to take tyres and you do not, 30 spots gained already. So for these drivers, a big strategy call to make. And if you took tyres in the first stint, you're feeling a whole lot better than perhaps the drivers who haven't taken any tyres in the race so far and were planning to take tyres on their second and final stop. So it's an interesting one. What do? You're either damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Exactly right. 100% if you're a bit further down the order, you put fresh tyres on. You give yourself the best possible chance of having a package to fight with to the end of the race. But if you further up the order, it becomes a bit more complicated, and it probably becomes a bit of a monkey see, monkey do scenario where you try to look at what everybody else is doing. The problem is, of course, in iRacing, it's not that simple because you can't actually see what everybody else is doing until you've already committed to what you've decided to do in the pit stop. So in that regard, it's a bit different to real life racing where the teams can try and outfox one another.
It definitely is, and interestingly, Race Control have still not changed the status of pit entry. Pit entry is still registered as closed by race director Sam Blacklock. So these drivers are still using a lot less fuel at the moment. So when they do eventually are allowed to dive into the pits, they're going to be able to take a lot less fuel because right now they're still burning fuel and obviously slowing themselves down. There's going to be less laps in the race. that they have to do on a tank of fuel. So the pit stops will be getting a little bit shorter, which just changes the element again as to whether you take tires or not, because the gains are going to be so much different again. So every lap, even on the safety car, the strategy here is evolving.
So, you know who I'm really liking at this point, based on strategy and tyre condition? Jeff Connell. He's one position behind Brock Feeney. He's got 1 lap's less fuel, but should still have enough to be able to make it through to the end, based on this safety car coming out, and he's got fresh tyres on board.
Nope, I agree 100%. He is in a fantastic spot at the moment, is Jeff Connell. As you can see on screen, last pitted just 5 laps ago, now working his 6th lap on this set of tyres. So for Jeff Connell, all the drivers in front of him A, don't have enough fuel to make it to the end, or B, have considerably older tyres than him. So he's got all the boxes ticked. All he has to do is pass a number of cars, perhaps a green flag restart, and then we'll see what the pace difference is and whether or not he can go all the way up to the leaderboard. Because right now, your provisional race leader is Michael Hammond. He has to pit. Andre Heimgartner can probably make it all the way to the finish on a tank of fuel, but his tyres are going to be trashed.
Exactly right. It's going to be fascinating here to see who comes into the pits when the pit lane opens, but there's a good chance. We know that Hammond's going to have to come in. We know that Suzlin, Harlow, Lupino, Martin and Hughes are all going to have to come in as well. So there's a good chance that the likes of Brock Feeney and Jeff Connell are going to vault up the order with some of those cars ahead of them come in for their pit stops. So we'll be just a couple of corners away from finding out the answers to the question of exactly which cars do have to come in, but there will be a number of drivers who are going to vault up several positions if they've got the fuel on board to be able to make it to the end of the race from this point.
Did we just have a Ferrari of Jeremy Clark go off the track on the safety car? I think we might have just had Jeremy Clark have a little bit of a whoopsie there under safety car conditions. You can see some witness marks on the track as well. He was one of the cars getting waved around the pack to regain a lap. And we'll go Motum Simulation Replay, just fluky heights. Under safety car, of course, the tyres will drop off in pressure quite a lot, so the high-speed stability is a whole lot less. And unfortunately, under safety car, a little bit of a whoopsie and a bit of a nudge into the barrier.
How embarrassing.
It's not ideal. It's not ideal in the slightest, unfortunately, for Jeremy Clark. But he does gain his lap back, so that is good news there for him, and he will be able to rejoin the race at its resumption. But I'm just surprised that the pit entry is still closed.
No, it's not. No, sorry to cut you off there, but we do have cars coming in. So Michael Hammond is in, Jackson Suzlin, Harlow, Matt Lupino, and Jaden Ransley all in the pits at this point.
Oh, we've had a crash on the safety car as well. These drivers are not having an easy time at the moment. Nathan Hearn, actually, one of the drivers who hit the wall under safety car there, and has actually got a bit of damage, to be fair. So I was laughing about it, but he's actually copped a fair bit of damage from that, and he was one of your drivers we had to keep an eye on at this safety car restart. Of course, he's had tyres and has fueled it to the end of the race. Random Simulation Replay on screen. You won't see it, but you will feel it. A big hit from the back sends him into the wall there. So on that replay, it did look a little bit like he lost that weaving his tyres a bit, but I can absolutely confirm there was contact from behind there.
So the driver behind Nathan Hearn was asleep, obviously, and Nathan Hearn will not impressed by that, I can tell you. The car that won the race off pit lane was Jackson Suzlin Harlow, so I think it was the first car to get back onto the track. He did not take tyres in the pit stop. He just put enough fuel in to get that car to the end of the race. Jaden Ransley, the second car to come out of the pits, and then Michael Hammond, Michael Gurry also coming in and out as well. Matt Lupino has put on a fresh set of tyres, so he will have very good tyres when the race resumes, but it's covered a big expensive track position because he's fallen back to 28th position. Later, John Martin's second, but he's 17 laps into a stint, so not sure if he's going to get to the end. If he does, he'll be extremely marginal on fuel. Ditto for Jared Hughes, who's actually got a lap less fuel than John Martin. Then it's Brock Feeney in position 4, And then it's Jeff Connell in position 5. And like I said, I think that Jeff Connell is in a pretty good position in terms of tyres in particular.
And what's even better for the driver of Jeff Connell is the cars in between him and your race leader. Well, you only have to count to 4 in between himself and Andre Heimgartner. So we were worried a little bit about how much traffic he would have to catch up to your race leader. The issue is not much at all. One of them, Brock Feeney, who has very, very poorly tyres. Jared Hughes, who's going to struggle to make the race. And John Martin, who's also not going to be able to make the finish as well. So there is a whole heap of issues here for some of these drivers. In fact, some of them peeling into the pits on the safety car restart as Andre plants his throttle to get a brilliant jump. He has beaten away from the drivers as
and Nathan Hearn's engine has blown as a result of that damage that he sustained with the crash under the safety car. We've got massive contact coming out of the final corner. A couple of cars firing into the pit wall, and they're still bumping and driving and crashing and somersaulting.
There are all kinds of chaos happening. Also, we've had 2 drivers, Brock Feeney for the road at turn number 1 and John Martin as well. So all kinds of chaos. Jeff Connell up to 3rd, but Andre Heimgartner has an enormous race lead to position number 2. It's almost gone off and under. So all of a sudden, everybody just having issues on this safety car restart. There has not been another safety car call, so it is still at green at the moment. But Jeff Connell is having all of the cards fall his way. Chaos and Honda hairpin.
And Jackson Harlow grabbed about 6 bonus positions there. He was 15th when the race resumed. He's already up to 9th position. Jackson of the chaos at this safety car restart. And we know that Jackson Harlow has got serious pace in that Ultra Sports Audi. He will be on a big charge with 20 minutes remaining.
Jeff Connell with a very aggressive pass on Jared Hughes into 2nd. He is hunting and hunting fast. Andre Heimgartner to Jeff Connell. The gap is visually closing every single corner right now. This has been a mammoth lap from Jeff Connell, who restarted in 6th. Now finds himself in position number 2 with only a matter of seconds between himself and race leader 1.3 at the line, and that is going to be a whole lot less at the end of lap 40.
What a recovery drive this has been for Jeff Connell to get himself back into a position where he's fighting for victory in this motor race after being backwards off the road on lap 1 at turn number 2 to get back into 2nd position, to be hunting down the race leader. Now that we get to the business end of the motor race, this has been a stunning recovery drive. And Jackson Harlow continues his push forward as well. He's made up a further 3 spots. JSH, he's up to position 6.
He is, and he is flying quick. Only 8 seconds off the race lead. That is a way to go, but he has 15 laps. And we've seen the pace he has. 15 laps, 8 seconds in tall order, but for Jackson, maybe, just maybe, he can manage to make that happen, especially if Andre and Jeff Connell begin to fight one another. If these two are scrapping away and costing each other time, there is every chance. I've just noticed safety car number 3, sorry.
Number 3, so a 3rd safety car intervention. Just when you thought that this race couldn't get any more topsy-turvy, we've got yet another safety car intervention.
And who's that going to benefit? We were just saying Jackson Harlow, 8 seconds to your race leader? No, forget that. It's a whole lot less than 8 seconds now. This is just, how many twists and turns can you fit into a motor race? As a couple of drivers on screen, forget about the whole red light procedure there.
So I wonder why this one's been deployed. I wonder if it's just because of all of the chaos that we saw at the safety car race start, and it's maybe just to give a few drivers the opportunity to get back into the race. So, surely... So this is at the restart, so it was Taylor Collins, we believe, was the driver that was initially involved. So you can see they're coming out of the final corner, and it was Taylor Collins who spun, and as he bounced back onto the racetrack and cars darted off to the right of the circuit to try and take evasive action, it just got worse and worse. More and more cars became involved. Actually, Taylor Collins. So, riding on board with him at the moment, obviously sporting a fair bit of damage to his car. Again, the one who I really feel sorry for, Nathan Hearn, whose engine blew up under the safety car and he had to come into the pits. This is what it looks like on board with Tyler Collins, who very quickly found himself part of the pinball machine that was the main straight at Phillip Island.
It's a horrible feeling there for Tyler Collins. Getting hit again by an Audi flying through the wreckage. Just nothing he could do there. He makes one little mistake and sadly is collected by a whole bunch of other cars. So a disaster there for him. And like you say, Nathan Hearn, you've got to feel sorry because his car looks relatively healthy under safety car, but when he got hit, it did sustain a fair bit of damage, and I've got to wonder if the driver not paying attention under safety car conditions was the cause of Nathan Hearn's engine failure in the end, which is just such a devastating way for a race to end if that is true. But this is a quick safety car. It's not staying around for very long. Both control confirm safety car in this lap. So there will be 13 laps remaining in this race, 17 minutes on the clock. This is going to be a very exciting sprint all the way to the finish. It says final lap on your screens. No, ignore that. There is still plenty of action to come on this safety car restart. It's going to be a fun one. Carl Gresh, your safety car driver, is going to accelerate away from the pack, and the control will be given to Andre Heimgartner, who last safety car restart got an absolute blinder and left the rest of the field, leaving in his wake. It's round 2 for him to try and lead a safety car restart, and Jeff Connell is a whole lot more alert.
Jared Hughes is going to be under assault from Brock Feeney and from Lockie Hughes and from Jackson Suzlin Harlow at this safety car restart as well. But Andre Heimgartner on worn tyres, he'll have to try and do his very best to defend from the cars behind, many of which have got a fresher set of tyres at their disposal. Oh, very wide. Jared Hughes at turn number 1 almost drops it off the racetrack, but managed to gather it up.
How good is this? Your top 6 right now, bumper to bumper, with just a matter of minutes left in this race. Endurance racing as best as you can see on screen. I believe that's John Martin going for a bit of a rotation at turn number 1, along with a whole heap of others. There's chaos at the Honda hairpin. Plenty of drivers changing position. Jared Hughes and Brock Feeney side by side, battling it out. It's also on for your race lead. Jeff Connell looks up the inside of Andre Heimgartner. I can't make the position stick into Siberia. Jared Hughes, Lockie Hughes, Brock Feeney, bumper to bumper through the turn in 220 kilometers an hour through Hayshed, hard on the brakes into Luton Heights. They cannot get any closer, but is it going to be a move for your race leader? Just Connell up the inside, contact with Heimgartner. He is off the road, and Connell may be looking at a drive-through penalty for pushing Heimgartner off the road.
Jackson Suzlin Harlow's gone. Jackson Suzlin Harlow, who was on the outside coming through turn number 11. He was trying to go around the outside. Contention for the outright victory based on its raw speed all night, that now finds his chances of a race win severely compromised.
Absolutely. It's absolute chaos and calamity at the moment. Who is going to come out on top at the end of this race? I have no idea, because currently Jeff Connell leads this race, but I'm sure the stewards will be looking at the incident with Andre Heimgartner. Brock Feeney, what can he do? Because, of course, he has not got fresh tyres. So, what can he do in regards to holding off Jared Hughes, who it's going to be tight to whether Jared Hughes can even make it on fuel or not. 2 safety cars is going to help him out considerably, but it's a long way to go for him as well. Lockie Hughes could be one of the drivers in for a very good result here if the front 2 in front of him aren't able to make it to the end on fuel, and if Jeff Connell gets a penalty.
Well, I just had a look at the replay there. Jeff Connell down the inside of Andre Heimgartner. I don't know that you could really penalise that one. There was space there. Yes, there was light contact between the 2 cars, but it was only the lightest of touches. I think that would probably be judged as fair bump play on.
We will see what the stewards say, but you're often correct on a lot of race director decisions there, Lockie, so I'll take your word for it right now. But it's a great battle going on for 2nd and 3rd at the moment, as we've got Lockie Hughes trying to join in the fight that includes Jared Hughes and Brock Feeney right now. Mercedes versus BMW Power, and the BMW not as good in a straight line as the Mercedes. One off the road goes Brock Feeney on the for 2nd. Contact! Lockie Hughes involved as well. Massive contact. And again, a twist and turn in the tail and narrative of this race.
Well, Jared Hughes is now shaping up to be the big beneficiary here because he's just kept his nose clean and he's stayed out of trouble, but he is going to be extremely marginal on fuel heading into the final 12.5 minutes of the motor race because it's been 24 laps since he made his last pit stop. So now you're looking at people like Ethan Arps and Michael Gurry who are potentially going to be contending for podium positions here. And Matt Lupino as well. He's probably another one that we need to keep an eye on. We know that Matt Lupino's had pretty decent pace all night, and he's got good tyres on his Audi as well.
Jeff Connell, drive-through penalty race leader, contact with car number 7.
So Jeff Connell, drive-through. Jared Hughes in second position, marginal on fuel. Brock Feeney in third, out of tyres. Could Ethan Arps win this race? There he is, sitting in position number 3. We've not really talked about him all night as one of our race contenders, but he's got a good strategy. He's got decent tyres on his car at the moment. He's got the fuels to get to the end, and all 3 of the cars in front are going to be compromised in one way or another.
What kind of script has been wrote for this race? This is absolutely incredible at the moment. Ethan Arps in third place needs to hunt down Jared Hughes. Of course, Jared is now on his 25th lap of this fuel stint, which is almost running out of fuel, it would seem. But there has been 2 safety cars in this stint of his fuel. So there is a bit of an element of just how much has he been able to save. Is it 7.5 more laps of fuel? I don't know, that's quite an ask. But if Jared Hughes can do it, he is on target for a win right now, because last lap around, Ethan Arps was actually slower than the BMW in front. So Jared Hughes, if he has the fuel, is doing exactly what he needs to right now.
Like you say, you could not have written the script for this race, or whoever did write the script for this race, clearly they deserve a pay rise to start off with, and also probably a good lie down as well, because you cannot script races like this. So Jeff Connell, at what point does he serve the drive-through penalty? I think you get, what is it, 3 laps to obey a directive to serve a drive-through?
Yep, that would make sense to me.
So the answer to that question is he still hasn't served that penalty just yet, and he has extended the margin to 4.2 seconds over Jared Hughes. Ethan Arp still in third position ahead of Brock Feeney, who's just about out of tyres and trying to fend off Michael Gurry. We're right on board with Zach Nickel on the main straight, who drives in a straight line past the wounded car of Lockie Hughes. Lockie Hughes obviously really struggling with straight line speed due to the damage for his Mercedes-Benz.
And just crucially as well, just for the battle up to the front of your, well, what's going to eventually become your effective race lead, Ethan Arp's last lap around did take half a second out of Jared Hughes. That balance in terms of lap times has now swung back in the favour of the Falcon Tyres Audi R8. So we'll see how that continues on. As look at this great battle down at a Honda corner between a number of cars, which includes Hugh Barter, Zach Nickel, and Lockie Hughes as well. Very, very close under brakes there as Hugh Barter moves a little bit there and also try to sneak up the inside of Lockie Hughes, who, like you say, definitely struggling at the moment. So plenty of these drivers, plenty of damage wounds and plenty of unhappy looking cars at the moment as Lockie Hughes runs a little bit wide at Lukey Heights, and on board with Hugh Barter. You can see how much he's trying to make something happen. Dives up the inside. It's messy.
And contacts between the 2 cars, and that results in Lockie Hughes getting spun around off the racetrack. Meanwhile, out in front, Jeff Connell continues to lead and continues to pull away, but we know that he's got that penalty hanging over his head. Jared Hughes in second position has now gone 27 laps on a tank of fuel. There's just under 9 minutes remaining in the race. Can he get that BMW home with the fuel that it's got in the tank at the moment? Ethan Arp's third, Michael Gurry in fourth, and then Andre Heimgartner continuing to hold out Matt Lupino in the battle for positions 5 and 6. Lupino, even despite the advantage of the fresh tyres, has not been able to find a way past Heimgartner's Mercedes at this stage.
No, he hasn't, as Michael Gurry goes a little bit wide at the hairpin and almost allows Heimgartner up the inside to go back, though, to this battle, including Brock Feeney and Michael Hammond. These two scrapping away quite hard, as well as Bishop and Draper behind. So these cars just really, really close at the moment. Hammond almost pushing the Mercedes of Brock Feeney through Siberia at that point in the race. So very, very close, very, very interesting racing at the moment. Hammond almost gets an overlap on the very wounded and slow Mercedes, and the tires are scraping the bottom of the barrel of grip. There is nothing left on them at the moment, and Hammond is in full attack mode, trying to find a way past. Can't do anything into MG though, but in the other side of the battle, Draper finds it quite easily past Bishop and clears the Mercedes at the exit of the hairpin. So great pass there from Jane Draper, who continues to charge through the field. Next target is Michael Hammonds, and Hammond will know this. He has to get past Brock Feeney ASAP, or else there is going to be all kinds of issues there. And just interestingly now, I haven't seen Jeff Connell dive into the pits, so that's definitely beyond 3 laps now. So we'll see what happens in regards to race control, making any kind of judgment on failure to serve a penalty. But in regards to Hughes and Arps has actually lost the 10th now to your second place BMW. So Hughes, if the fuel is there, if the fuel is good, he is doing a fantastic job on tyres, which are absolutely shot right now.
Well, that's the big question at this stage, isn't it? That there is Jared Hughes holding down second position at the moment and 2 seconds ahead of Ethan Arps at this stage. But massive question mark over Jared Hughes and fuel, because he's now been on the racetrack for 28.5 laps. We've got, according to our calculations, 4 laps out of a tank of fuel to be able to make it to the end of the race. Matt Lupino continuing to apply the pressure to Andre Heimgartner, who in turn is right up behind Michael Gurry. This is the battle for positions 4, 5 and 6 on at the racetrack at this stage. Michael Gurry just doesn't quite seem to have the pace of the cars that he's around at the moment.
No, he doesn't, but he's making it a very, very wide Mercedes, and he's doing everything he needs to just hold on at the moment. Heimgartner, no obvious gaps through, and we'll have to find or get a little bit creative in his pass, because if he doesn't soon, Matt Lupino is sure to have some kind of attack on the back of the number 7 Mercedes, who was leading at the safety car restart, but contact with Jeff Connell did plummet him down the order. So we know there's speed in Andre Heimgartner, but sadly it wasn't to be in regards to a race result, as Brock Feeney has been disqualified and removed from the server.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's an interesting one for Brock Feeney. We saw that he had quite heavy contact with Lockie Hughes, but not quite sure what that disqualification's for. And I think that Jeff Connell, if he's been handed a drive-through penalty, that if he doesn't take that soon, he might be facing disqualification soon as well. One thing the officials do not like in real life or virtual motorsport is drivers ignoring black flags.
Well, absolutely. I'm just having a look at what Brock Feeney was doing, but it didn't look like anything too intentional at the moment. But we will see how everything goes.
So night done for Brock Feeney, as at the moment our focus is on the cars that are battling for positions 4, 5 and 6 of Gurry, Heimgartner and Lupino. 4.5 minutes remaining in the race. Jeff Connell still not in the pits, still stays out on the racetrack. 4.5 minutes to go in the race. 3 laps to go in terms of the distance that we believe will be completed.
Well, there we go. And I've also just received word from our race director that Jeff Connell's penalty has been moved to post-race investigation. So he's currently leading. We can remove the drive-through penalty. That's what hasn't been served provisionally. But there is still a question mark over the 26 car at the moment. So we were looking at the battle between Ethan Arps and, of course, Jared Hughes, who was 3 laps too short. Ethan Arps now moves into your provisional potential race winner if the penalty for Jeff Connell is applied at the end of the race. So more question marks going on in this race than answers right now.
There are, and casts a shadow of doubt over the outcome of the race, doesn't it? Jeff Connell's argument will be that there was room there and it was only a light touch. Heimgartner's argument will be that he copped a hit from behind, which forced him wide an MG corner. So they'll both argue one way or the other, but what is in absolutely no dispute whatsoever is that we have witnessed an absolute cracker of a motor race here at Phillip Island tonight.
No, absolutely. And how many times does this series just produce the goods and provide us with a fantastic finish at the very end? I don't know how it does it, but every single time it is nail-biting stuff right down to the checkered flag. And in a series, that is exactly what you're looking for. And this series definitely does produce it. So if they're planning on bigger and better things in Season 2, then count me in.
Can't wait to see what the announcements are for Season 2 as Heimgartner keeps the pressure on Michael Gurry. We've got 2 laps remaining in the race at this stage, and Jeff Connell's margin at the front of the field is now more than 10 seconds. In fact, it's almost 11 seconds over Ethan Arps, who has been the quiet achiever of this race. Didn't get involved in any of the skirmishes, didn't get involved in any unnecessary battles, didn't get involved in any crashes either, and it's paid dividends for him at the end of the night. He sits in a very, very strong and solid second position at this stage.
Well, that's the incredible thing, isn't it? You look at Ethan Arp's car and there is not a single scratch on the Audi R8. He has kept it in pristine condition. He's done the perfect race driver thing and been, I hate to say it, but boring. Is not do anything over the top. Don't be over dramatic. Just hit your marks, run your race, hit your strategy. And it always ends up paying dividends. And Ethan Arps is proving that to an absolute T right now and has done a fantastic job all race long. So whilst he hasn't been perhaps on the highlight reel, so to say, is absolutely a well-deserved performance for tonight's race.
Well, the saying is that you have to buy a ticket to the end of the race in an endurance race like this one, and Ethan Arps has done that to perfection tonight. Here come our race leaders out of the final corners to begin what will be the final lap of another epic and enthralling race in the Carbon Gaming GT3 Eseries here at Phillip Island, and it's 11.5 seconds the margin for Jeff Connell over Ethan Arps as we get into the final lap.
Absolutely. So we'll see what Jeff Connell can do because he's done a fantastic job all race long. Just one more lap to round it out, but there is still plenty of drivers who are fighting a little bit harder for the position at the moment. Michael Gurry holding onto a podium, but only just over Andre Heimgartner, Matt Lapino, and Paul Auditore, who's quietly snuck up onto the back of this battle pack, is now looking for 5th place. Can't quite do it though. As contact, Michael Gurry's going to lose 3rd place on the final lap of the race. He's been defending for so long, so successfully, and on the final lap he's going to get turned not once but twice. A disaster there, and he will be absolutely heartbroken after that result. Heimgartner is going to inherit 3rd place now through sheer luck and sometimes a bit of contact as well, but he might lose it as well. Contact! And unbelievably, Paul Auditore, who snuck up on the battle, is going to reap the ultimate rewards. Paul Auditore into 3rd, but Jeff Connell, the driver who stole the headlines in this race, crosses the line to win the final round of the Carbon Gaming Esports Championship at Phillip Island. A great race, but a question mark over his head with a penalty as Ethan Arps finishes in 2nd. Could that potentially be a win? As absolute calamity at the line. Paul Auditore in 3rd, and I believe Michael Hammond will now inherit 4th.
Well, few question marks there because Jeff Connell, we know that there's a post-race investigation for him. Paul Auditore, we saw that he made contact there with Michael Gurry getting into Siberia on the final lap, so probably a question mark over him as well. So few post-race investigations. It's going to be a busy night for the clerk of the course and for the driving standards observer. What an insane conclusion to the Carbon Gaming GT3 Eseries here at Phillip Island.
We've said it so many times, this series just produces absolute fantastic amounts of carnage, chaos, and sometimes brilliant racing as well. And I think if you're going to sum this race up, or this series up, in any possible way, the final 2 laps of that race may just be the best example of that, as a Michael Gurry.
So we're hearing.
I'm very confused. So our timing screens have gone a little bit whack on us, and now we believe this might be the final lap. So Jeff Connell officially crosses the line to take the win. Ethan Arps in 2nd, and Paul Auditore in 3rd. But a lot of drivers have actually backed off at the line as well. That's almost caused a few changes in position as Michael Hammond does officially finish in 4th, Brett Bishop in 5th. But yeah, some of the lap times are a lot slower and off the pace because drivers thought that was the final lap of the race, as did us. We said this series can produce chaos. Still does after the checkered flag.
Well, I think that the confusion that we had there at the finish pretty much just sums up what has been a a very, very chaotic and complex race to follow this evening, that's for sure.
Well, I don't really have many words to describe exactly what we just witnessed. But what we might try and do is see if we can get a bit of a replay up on screen of the incident involving Andre Heimgartner. And he was definitely involved in his fair share of incidents across the race, unfortunately. And it was a great effort, leading for a lot of the race, including the final safety car restart. But I will eventually finish down in 8th place. You can see on screen right now, he was side by side with Michael Gurry. And this is a beautiful camera shot as well, looking over the beautiful scenery of Phillip Island as these two go side by side. Late on the brakes, they would go into Honda hairpin. And I'm not entirely sure where this incident did occur, but we're about to get an idea now.
It was heading up towards Lukey Heights, I think you'll find, so... It might have actually been on the previous lap. We will get there eventually. So the interesting thing was that Heimgartner actually ended up ahead of Gurry, but it was Matt Lupino, I think, who made contact with Heimgartner as they headed up into Lukey Heights. So through the hay shed, which very high-speed corners in these GT cars with all of their aero, and Matt Lupino went up the inside, contact in a very, very fast and committed part of the racetrack, which sent Heimgartner off and into the tyres.
Looking on board now with Andre Heimgartner, get an idea of exactly what's happened there. That's a big dive there and just loses a little bit, which then turns into a very dramatic takedown of Andre Heimgartner, who, like you say, goes clattering into the tyres there. We'll get one more look at it, I believe, as a modem simulation replay providing the goods. Look at the Audi, darts to the inside, gets a big wiggle. And sadly, Andre, he left the racing room. He was allowing the two to race side by side, but sadly, the Audi and its twitchy behavior, a survey said no.
So Heimgartner fell down to 8th position and Matt Lupino all the way down to 11th position. Let's go through your provisional race results for the final round of the Carbon Gaming GT3 A-Series. Jeff Connell on top ahead of Ethan Arps. Paul Auditore in 3rd, back to Michael Hammond, Brett Bishop, Jaden Draper in 6th. And then it was Kobe Williams, Andre Heimgartner, Michael Gurry, and Zach Nickel completing the top 10.
Matt Lupino was involved in all kinds of battles, but would end up in 11th place. Rain Campbell from 24th into 12th halves his position on track. Macaulay Jones in 13th with Jane Ransley and Jordan Pruden, your top 15. Scott Short makes up at 16th. James Foster and James Simpson in 17th and 18th with Jackson Susan Harlow, a big talking point from pole to 19th. And Lockie Hughes finishing your top 20.
And then it was Jared Hughes, ahead of Josh Thompson, Lachlan Potter, who we saw involved in a big incident early in the race. John Martin led at one point, but finished up down in 24th. Back then to Dalton Ellery. Nathan Hearn, very unlucky to be clouted behind the safety car and taken out of proceedings. Steve Ellery in 27th, back to Ben Blaze. Tyler Collins and Peter Matson in 30th.
Justin Ford in 31st ahead of Eli Donaldson, who was involved the wrong way on track a number of times throughout. Craig Gurry in 33rd with Mitch Campbell in 34th. And then we start to get into a couple of our retirements late in the race. BJ Kennedy off at the final corner. Jack Cofold, William Yarwood was off at turn 2 more times than he was on it, unfortunately. Hugh Barter in 38th, Jeremy Clark in 39th, and Brady Carr in 40th.
And then in 41st position, Jamie Craig getting back into the retirements now. Brady McHugh back to Ben Gomersall, Eddie Beswick, Fraser Ross, Matty Mascorn, Ross Rizzo, Kyle Greck, Brock Feeney, who was excluded from the race, and then our race director, Sam Blacklock, who is also our safety car driver.
Well, there we go. Like I said, I really don't know how exactly to describe what on earth happened in that race, but what a season has been. Twists and turns literally every single way throughout. I loved every second of that, Lockie.
So did I. I'm still a bit confused about exactly what we saw tonight. And it was a race of chaos and confusion and not quite finalised yet either in terms of the results. But stay tuned to the Carbon Gaming GT3 E-Series social media channels for the updated results, which will no doubt be published very, very soon. So that completes all of the action from the final round of the Carbon Gaming GT3 Eseries. Hope you've enjoyed the action here on SimSpeed TV. Thanks to my co-commentator, Bo Wowbert. I'm Lockie Mansell. Bye for now.
This is fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's going with the outside, both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taking Anderson. Anderson's up top.
Oh my god! Oh, big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
Second very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, there we go. Oh no! That's, oh my god!
God, what?
Assist to the front bumper, and he hits him again now. Rayon Fowler into the outside wall. Immediately to the inside goes Logan Cloudman is going to touch in. Pit press sideways. What a save.
Look to the outside as Bronco goes off. De Jong into second place.
I'm going for the switchback. Oh, pinpoint driving.
It's howling down to the inside.
Trying this contact though.
Slide left to the racetrack. Chris Benner drives it back down underneath, and he takes that second spot right back. Joker goes to Garrett Lowe.
Garrett Lowe should take victory with all that contact. He's going to try and make the move around the outside the parabolica. That's not going to work, but he's going to try and get the cutback here. Get the run out the parabolica. That's beautifully done there. Michael Schubert